and welcome to another episode of the Know Your Compliance podcast. I am excited to be having another conversation. This is our first return guest, and I've brought Mr. Chris Thompson back this time in his official capacity as a senior investigator with the BC Securities Commission. So, Chris, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Good to be back at my kitchen table again.
back at your kitchen table, talking about all sorts of geeky compliance topics. I love it.
I'm also one of Greg's nerdy friends that was like, I have all my own gear, let's use it. Okay.
And my editor loves it.
Really?
Loves it.
Oh, awesome. All right.
I was being sarcastic.
Oh, okay. I'm like, really? I can't stand editing.
So today's topic is going to be pig butchering, and we'll delve into that in a second. But we kind of only touched last time on your background, so let's give people another couple of words just to better understand who you are and why you're able to speak to this topic, I think.
Yeah, so I got the thumbs up from work to talk about this because this is something we deal with like all day, every day kind of thing. So I work for the BC Securities Commission. I've worked there since May of 2016. Before that, I was a lawyer for a while. I did a few years of tax law, which was pretty interesting. I did 4 months of divorce law, which was the worst 4 months of my entire life. And then long time ago, I was also a financial advisor. And one of the reasons I got into financial crime actually was that one of our clients at the time in the advisor space was someone who had been victimized out of about $120,000.
Okay.
And I was thinking, you know what, if you get mugged or you get your wallet stolen, like as long, the bruises will heal and you can kind of go about your life. But if you get your retirement fund stolen, you're hooked. Like that is a life-changing experience.
A massive problem.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so that sort of got me interested in financial crime. And then I did an informational interview with someone that I met through one of my mom's neighbors. My mom's neighbor worked in financial crime. She put me in touch with someone who was an investigator at the commission.
Okay.
And it was really interesting. She said, like, look, we want people that are interested in the industry. We want people that are interested in and passionate about this type of thing. But you just don't have the experience. We need either accountants or lawyers. I was like, well, okay, fair enough. Thanks for your time. Went back to law school when I was 30, got out, worked in private practice for a while, realized it was terrible. And long story short, I went to the commission.
Interesting.
Position opened up. So yeah.
So you kind of, I don't think I knew this, that you actually went back to law school somewhat to possibly end up in this kind of a role, or at least with this in the back of your mind as a possibility that would exist as a result of that.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't directly think like I'll take my law degree to go to the commission.
Yeah.
But my boss at the time paid for me to go to this like workplace suitability consulting thing.
Okay.
So I did a bunch of tests. They did this big report on me that said I should either be a financial analyst, a university professor, or a lawyer. And so financial analyst, I think, is all just voodoo. They just make stuff up and throw it against the wall.
Quite.
No offense to financial analysts out there.
They've all turned off the show now.
Yeah,
so we're good now.
Talked to a university professor who was like, don't bother, the competition's too much and it's not really that much fun. And then so law school it was. So I got into UBC Law and just kind of ran with it.
That's fun.
Yeah.
So BC Securities Commission.
Yes.
Maybe give us like a 2-second, 20-second, whatever.
Yep.
What do they do? Like, I know protecting the public is first and foremost, but what does that look like? Give us a quick version of that, and then we'll delve into pig butchering.
Sure. So in general, we regulate the investment market in BC. And in Canada, investments are provincially regulated, so all of the provinces have their own securities regulator. So there's a few different aspects to what we do. There's parts of the BC Securities Commission that deal with companies raising money. And not that they've done anything illegal, they're trying to raise funds via equity or debt or whatever. Yeah. We take people's prospectuses, we review the prospectuses. We don't draft the laws, that's Parliament, but we basically enforce them, and that's the enforcement. So that's me. So the ninth floor, I call it the goon squad, even though none of us look like goons. We're all lawyers and accountants.
You do get a badge though, right?
Yeah, some of us have badges. Yeah. Some of us are
fun.
Special provincial constables.
Exactly.
We don't get guns though. Everyone asks, like, no. And so enforcement, where I work, is generally a reactive division, because what happens is complaints come into the commission, and if they're enforcement related, they'll come down to enforcement, and then we investigate them.
Okay.
That's generally how it works. I work in the detection, assessment, and disruption team. So we do more proactive steps. There's been a couple cases where we've either found stuff online or kind of been contacted by friends. Like I've had a couple friends of mine say like, hey, is this a scam?
Right.
Yes. If you have to ask me, I have not yet in the 8.5 years I've been working at the commission, I have not found a case where someone has asked me, is this a scam? And the answer was no.
That's awesome.
There's
Scary
actually
too, but
one, I have also 100% track record of people asking me about stocks and those stocks going to effectively zero.
okay.
So if you're asking me about stuff, yeah. Unless it's like, Chris, should I invest in index funds? Yeah, that's probably a good plan.
I was gonna say, dare I ask? Like, I got my money in a Vanguard fund.
I think
Can
you'll
you
be
wipe
okay.
that out to
I
zero?
think you'll be okay.
whew.
Yeah. So do I.
All right. So that's really cool. And then, so protecting the public, kind of dealing with that incoming information. And then, I guess, turning to today's topic, where does pig butchering fit into all of that? And let's maybe start with a definition, because it sounds really cool. I really like bacon, and pork chops are all right, but I suspect that's not what we're talking about.
I was going to make a bacon joke, but you beat me to it.
There you go.
Well, it's interesting. A lot of people haven't heard the term. Mm-hmm. I did a podcast on it a while ago for the International Association of Financial Crimes Investigators, and I told my wife Anna that I was going to do a podcast on pig butchering. She's like, "What?" I'm like, "What do you mean? What do you mean? What?" Like, we have lived together for over a decade. This is all what I do all day, every day, and she didn't know what it was. Mm-hmm. It's essentially luring investors into investing in fraudulent schemes via online relationships.
Okay.
That's sort of kind of my definition of it. Where it comes from, where the actual term pig butchering comes from, it's a Chinese phrase, shazu pan, which literally translates to something like killing pig plate. I didn't make up the term. We didn't make up the term. But what it is the process of sort of fattening up a pig for slaughter. And we get into it a little bit in more detail later, but really you get an initial investment from a victim, mm-hmm. Through whatever means, and then that initial investment looks like it's growing, and then you can pay a little bit of money out back to the investor to give them the idea that, hey, this is a legit investment, there's real money there, and then that induces the investor to put in more and more money, which is sort of the fattening the pig bit. And then when the whole thing collapses, or they think they're not going to get any more money from the person, that's the sort of slaughter part.
Right.
And so that's where the term pig butchering comes from.
So there's often a layer of like a bit of a pyramid scheme worked into there potentially. Like if there's some money going back to the investor, it's helpful to have other money coming in and
yeah, I guess you could say that.
Yeah. Okay. So generally speaking, fraud that is over a long period of time, that's kind of slowly growing the amount and then getting to some sort of denouement, for lack of a better word, where there's going to be a massive amount of money taken at the end, kind of thing, or along the way sometimes.
It's always along the way. The types of cases we see are, for some reason, it's 250 US is usually the initial investment. We see tons of those. And because most people are like, oh, $250, even if this is a scam, I'm only out $250.
Yeah, it's a pretty small amount.
Whatever, yeah. And a lot of the times, people won't even report to us because it's $250. Like, you can spend that at a hockey game, right? And like, whatever, who cares? Like, I learned my lesson. I don't want to deal with it anymore.
Yeah.
And so what happens is they'll invest $250 on some random investment platform, and then it'll grow to $10,000. And they'll be like, oh, this is awesome. Like, can I put some more money? And then they'll put, oh yeah, you can go to tier 2 of whatever investment program if you have $25,000 invested. So they'll send another 15 grand.
Right.
And then over time, they'll send, bank transfers or crypto transfers of $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 until they've invested however much money. I mean, we've seen anything up to, I think my record is about 2.1 million.
Whoa.
Yeah, that was a big one. And then when you try and get your money out, that's when the fees start. It's like, okay, well, Mr. Dent, we're happy to process your withdrawal of $100,000, but what you have to do is, as you know, in Canada, you have to pay tax. Tax is 43.7%, so you have to pay us 43.7% of the gains before you can withdraw your money. And then that's where the sort of slaughtery bit part starts, because someone's like, well, what? That's not how it works. Well, no, I'm sorry. Like, that's the law. You have to pay tax. You can't just not pay tax, Mr. Dent. And then so they get the tax, and there's another fee, and then there's a wire transfer fee, and then the wire transfer gets stuck. And so there's this unending series of fees so the scammers can get as much money out of you as they can. And then at some point, the person's like, F this is a scam. And then the scammers are like, okay. And then they stop contact. But then the recovery room scammers start. So what happens is the initial scammers take your information. Greg Dent invested $280,000 on such and such dates, and they'll send it to a different group of scammers who will call you up and say, Mr. Dent, my name is Chris Thompson. I'm with the Blockchain Association of North Kentucky. I don't know. And whatever.
Geography, sure, yeah.
Or the UK. No, they'll make it legitimate. They're like, I'm with the Blockchain Association of UK, and he'll call you from a UK number, which is, of course, spoofed.
Yeah.
We've recently arrested the people at scamcoin.com, and I understand you invested $280,000. So we raided their call center. We've seized a bunch of Bitcoin, and we'd like to get you your money back. And the investors are like, oh my God, really? Well,
this is amazing.
This is amazing. Yeah. So what I need you to do, I need you to set up a wallet at the such and such a crypto company, and just send a link payment of 2.7% of the value recovered. And then that'll confirm your account, and then we'll send the money over.
Wow.
And then there's
dark.
more fees and more, and it just keeps on going.
That is dark.
So
now you've just given us a couple of examples that were mostly focused on crypto.
Yeah.
And I think generally speaking, in my kind of loose knowledge, crypto's a fairly frequent version of that, but this doesn't have to be crypto.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
We see a lot of bank transfers as well.
Okay.
There's a kind of one or many money laundering networks. I mean, or there's many money laundering networks around the world, but we've seen kind of the same bank accounts show up time and again in a number of these cases.
Oh.
And so that's a term called money mule. So a money mule is someone who either intentionally or unintentionally lets their bank account be used by nefarious parties.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, we've done a few mule visits. There have been press releases, and we've done news about this, so I can talk about it. Where we have a number of cases, people invest in scamcoin.com. That's not an actual site. I mean, it is, but there's nothing there. I looked, so I just say scamcoin.com. We can continue to use that. Whatever random owner of that can, I don't know. I'll buy it off you if you have. But so whoever's invested in scamcoin.com, sometimes they'll say, yeah, send a wire transfer to such and such a person, and it's like some company in Richmond or a guy in Burnaby or whatever.
Right.
And so we see those bank transfers, and then we throw them on a list, and we're like, you know what? We're going to go see this person. We'll talk to this person because they're a real human in the Vancouver area.
Yeah.
And so we talked to a bunch of them. And now the problem is, at least for Securities Act purposes, we can't prosecute them for anything because our provisions require at least some level of knowledge of what's going on.
Mm.
And in some cases, they just had no idea. Like I talked to one person who received like $2,000 or something like that. And she was like, yeah, I make wigs, and I sold a wig, and that was the payment. And I'm like, well, okay. And it was just sort of this confluence of factors that somehow a scammer needed a wig and directed the payment from the victim to like the wig maker. And then now the scammer has a wig. So somewhere around here, there's someone that's quasi-related to a scammer with a $2,000 wig.
Weird. So like the actual commercial transaction there, I don't know if that's the right market value for a wig, but let's assume a wig is worth $2,000. That person literally did nothing wrong. They just were selling their wares.
Yep.
And now
I don't know if, I could say like, yeah, maybe she should check ID, but I don't know, like, how many of us have sold something on Craigslist and like, no, dude, if you show up with an amount of money matches the ad, whatever, here's the widget.
Yeah.
I've never checked
I just
ID.
sold some tires off of Facebook Marketplace. Like I took $300. I don't care.
I don't know, but yeah, right. Like as long as I'm not dusting cocaine off the bills as you give them to me, I'm kind of okay with it.
Yeah.
So there's some of those situations where these people are just completely unwitting mules, right? Then there's the spectrum of sort of people in the middle where it's like, oh yeah, I gave my passport to my buddy, and I guess I've never seen this bank account.
Yeah, well, and I mean, if I can tie this back to a previous episode of our show, there's probably an element of human trafficking where there's people who are victims whose accounts are being used for money muling purposes as well. Would be
that's another one. There's victims of the scams, and the scammers will say, okay, well, if you want to start making your money back, you can help us with some of our money transfers. And so victims of scams will allow their bank accounts to be used to send money to and from other people.
Get some of their money back, maybe, but
they'll get 5% of each cut or something. And so, like the banks are sort of aware to this, in that they have their fraud detection systems, and if there's large amounts of wire transfers coming in and out, especially to and from strange jurisdictions, I have to keep in mind that I only see Like, to me, it just seems obvious. But again, the problem is I don't see everyone else's bank account. I just see the bank accounts of people who are already dealing with this money mule stuff. So
Okay.
I don't know how many bank accounts are out there that look like that for people that aren't laundering money. So to me, it seems obvious. It's like, well, duh, if there's these wire transfers, in from someone in the interior, and 30 seconds later it goes out to ShakePay,
Right.
or Binance, or like some Hong Kong company. I'm like, well, I don't know. This looks super sketchy. Like, the first time, okay, maybe, but then when there's like 10 in a row, and you've got some 75-year-old farmer who has $130,000 of wire transfers going through his account in a month, like, someone should take a look at that.
That seems like that seems like transaction monitoring should have picked up on that as a weird thing. To me, anyhow, as
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair to the banks, like they'll fill out their STRs, they'll send it off to FinTrack.
Sure, yeah.
And I mean, unless the bank wants to punt the client, which some of them do. I mean, I've seen a number of cases where the banks are like, bye, like, we're closing your account, like, sayonara, dude.
Totally. Yeah. So that's interesting, and that's where we start to get an intersection between what our company generally works in that AML space and pig butchering, and that's kind of why I wanted to have this conversation.
Yeah.
If I'm a frontline real estate agent, if I'm a frontline mortgage broker, for that matter, if I'm a compliance officer at any of these things, where am I going to see that? What is that going to look like? What should I be kind of thinking about and trying to...
Yeah, there's, I think, two things you want to look at. Transactions that are out of character based on the banking history, and transactions that are out of character based on the person.
Okay.
So a lot of what we see on these investments, I mean, I see them just from the pig butchering context. So, someone... And it's not usually, like, you used to think it's a lot of old people getting scammed out of stuff.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones that'll actually answer a phone. But it's not necessarily the case. Like, it's all ages, all races, like everyone. It's a fairly wide spectrum.
Well, the crypto thing probably opened up a whole new demographic of potential victims.
100%. Because old people don't understand crypto and they don't care. They're like, I'm not sending you Tether. I don't know what that is. I'm like, good. That's a good answer. If you don't understand it, don't send $100,000. Yeah. But if you have, like, we had one case where I was dealing with a money laundering network, and there was a guy who was in his like mid 70s, and he looked like a farmer. And there's $400 million of Tether of USDT going through his crypto account in 2 months.
400 million?
Yeah, like hundreds of millions of dollars of USDT. So for those of you listening, so Tether USDT is basically, it's called a stable coin, where a company called Tether has said, okay, $1 Tether is worth a US dollar. So they have a US dollar somewhere, and you're basically just trading US dollars on a blockchain. Like, that's the theory. So $400 million went through this guy's account. And it's like, okay, that should be kind of like a 76-year-old. I mean, maybe I'm stereotyping, but I don't know any 76-year-old guys that are going to have that kind of money running through their account.
Well, I would say I can name a few of them, but I can name almost all of the ones who would have the financial capacity to do that legally. So
yeah, that's true. And you're not going to live in like some backwater street in Cyprus or something, right? Like,
these are names we know. Is my point.
Yeah. They put the address on there. You can look it up on Google Earth, and if it's like some dingy second floor apartment, you're like, this doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
You can also look at it from the electronic perspective. Like, we had one case where I had a couple of accounts. I got some crypto accounts out of some residents of China. And there's a bunch of crypto being laundered through them. So I emailed the account owners, and they got back to me. And he said, like, oh, I sold that account 3 years ago.
Oh.
I'm like, what? Oh, yeah, no, China banned crypto. So someone in a Telegram group offered me some money for the account, and I sold it.
Oh, interesting.
Like, but dude, like, it's your name and address on the thing. And like, what? Like, okay, whatever. But so I mean, there's some knowledge there, or at least some reckless disregard for how life actually works.
Oh my gosh! So personal responsibility aside, and lack of personal responsibility, I'm still stuck, and this is always where our audience struggles. Is that's cool, and these are really fun, but I don't ever see as a real estate agent, as a mortgage broker, I don't have that financial that access to those accounts.
Right.
And so I think the second thing you said there's behaviors, there's answers. That's where I think maybe we could help our audience a little bit more.
Yeah. So we've seen a few mortgage brokers involved, not as much in pig butchering, but in some of these investment frauds. And I can sort of tie it in because it's the same underlying concepts. Like some of the cases that I've dealt with have had mortgage brokers involved for a person to get a second mortgage on their place because they want to invest in something. And if it comes to me, it's probably a fraud because it's fallen apart. I mean, in some of the cases, it's not, but let's assume it is. If it's a pig butchering or online scam type fraud, a lot of these investors are going to be coached on exactly what to say. So they'll take out a second mortgage, and the people are going to say, okay, well, what are you going to use the money for?
Right.
And then that's where the scammers will coach them, and they'll say, I would like to do X. They're not going to say, I want to invest in an online investment platform that I heard about 2 weeks ago from this extremely attractive woman that DM'd me out of nowhere on Instagram. They'll say, I would like to buy some Bitcoin to hold it in cold storage.
Okay.
That'll be their story. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess that's sure. If you want to invest in Bitcoin, that's how it's going to work. I mean, up until it on the blockchain, it's for a time, it's almost indistinguishable. That story is almost indistinguishable from investing in a scam, just because of the way the tracing looks. And that's what they'll tell. That's what they'll tell the crypto companies too, because the mortgage broker will help them get a loan or get a second mortgage and get $100,000.
Right.
That $100,000 is going to be a wire transfer to probably a Canadian institution, a registered Canadian crypto institution like Endax, ShakePay. Binance was in Canada for a while, but they left. I'm trying to think of who else.
ShakePay is the only name I actually
know.
ShakePay,
Endax. There's another one. Wealthsimple.
Oh,
you can get crypto on Wealthsimple.
Yeah.
I think there's about 6 exchanges that are registered in Canada.
Okay.
And if they're registered in Canada, we know who they are. They'll answer to us. We've got good working relationships with all of them. They'll help us out if victims contact them or contact us. And so I have no problems with any of those, with any of the registered exchanges. And so the mortgage brokers and sort of the frontline staff have to keep an eye out for this type of thing where someone's taking a giant wire transfer and sending it to a crypto institution. And if it's out of character for them or if it's out of character for the account, like if this person's been investing in, if they have a net worth of $5 million and they've been investing in fly-by-night startups for the last 15 years, maybe not.
Yeah, maybe that's their...
You want to buy 100,000 Dogecoin or whatever Trump tokens is coming out. Like, I don't know what kind of crypto stuff. Fill your boots, right?
Yeah.
But if you're a 76-year-old grandmother who has one GIC of $100,000 and you want to cash it out and send a wire transfer of 50 grand to somewhere,
that should flag something.
Yeah.
Well, so the mortgage broker one you just gave us is actually super helpful in that I can quite see somebody approaching a mortgage broker to secure that second mortgage and not having a particularly rational reason for doing so.
Yep.
That's interesting. That's a great example.
And I mean, it's even got to the point where there's sort of this evolution of an arms race between the compliance people and the scammers, because the compliance people will ask more and more questions like, what do you plan on doing with this money? For the crypto exchange, for the crypto accounts, you have to fill out this questionnaire when you open an account. Like, what's your intent with this money? How are you going to fund it? Is anyone helping you fill out this form?
Right.
And the scammers will be on the phone with them. They're like, oh, they asked me this. Is anyone helping me? Oh, no. Okay, tell them no. Otherwise, this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
Okay, then they say no. And then they have to lie through a lot of the form because the scammers know that if they tell the truth on any part of it, their account's going to get rejected.
It's going to raise a red flag, yeah.
And then we get a lot of complaints where it said, I sent a bunch of money to Endax and the scammers they were on the phone with me and they told me to lie and all these things and now my money's gone. I'm like, well... and the other thing I wanted to mention too, a lot of the times victims won't know the legal difference between a Canadian platform like a Canadian investment or crypto platform and like the scamcoin.com, because we get a lot of complaints where it's like, hey, I invested in ShakePay.
Right.
Like, well, no, you didn't. You sent crypto to ShakePay and then your ShakePay account forwarded the crypto to the scammers. But the way the scammers set it up is they're like, okay, well, no, they may have pretended to be with ShakePay, or they may have pretended that ShakePay was related to them or something. And so that's one of the ways that the scammers get the victim's trust is they send your money is actually going to a trusted, regulated Canadian institution.
Okay.
So people trust ShakePay because it's, an Endax or Wealthsimple because they're legitimate companies. They're registered. You can see they're registered. And then the victims have it in their mind that their money went to ShakePay. And that's where the trouble was, but it didn't. The money went to ShakePay. And a lot of the times the scammers will use some remote desktop software like AnyDesk. And I mean, there's others, I just don't know any of them off the top of my head. The money will go to ShakePay. The scammers will log on to the person's ShakePay account and then just send the money away.
There.
Yeah, just
I
send the crypto from there. So the people don't know where they've sent them.
Oh, crazy.
And there's been a few cases where I've had to basically walk the victims through, okay, you have to contact ShakePay, get them to send you their transaction history, send that to me, and then I can trace your crypto and figure out where it went.
Right. Fascinating. Yeah, okay. No, that's fascinating.
Yep.
So I guess if from a serving our audience point of view, I think just generally asking questions and knowing your client and understanding what does and doesn't make sense for your client. And I mean, I hate to always come back to that because so much of what we do in financial crimes really is just like thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're a compliance officer, just thinking through the transaction is, I don't know, some massive percent, and I could make up a number of 95, but some massive percent of it is actually just solved by thinking through and putting yourself in the person's shoes. And does this make sense?
The other problem that you're going to run into when you're talking to people who are victims, they're not going to believe you.
Right.
If they're at the point where they're sending money to this online scam, they think it's real.
Particularly large amounts of money.
Especially large amounts of money. Especially when you've already sent a large amount of money. Because then you're essentially having to admit that you've sent 75% of your net worth to scammers in Cambodia or Laos or Myanmar, or wherever the case is, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the hardest part of my job, is talking to people who don't realize it's a scam yet. Like I've got one file right now where the son wrote in and said, hey, like my dad sent $500,000 to this scam. I mean, they're well off. This isn't, I don't think it's life-changing amounts of money, but it's a big chunk. It's like 2 G-Wagons amount of money. And I've been trying to talk to the dad. The only way I got the dad to answer the phone is by spoofing the caller ID of the scammer.
Wow.
So the son sent me, he's like, yeah, this is the scammer's name. This is Professor Shane. I'm like, okay, whatever. This is his phone number. And so I downloaded a tool onto my phone, and the first one didn't work, and my money went to God knows what. Like it's sort of this gray area.
Of course.
And so I got one that did work. And then I punched the numbers in, and he's like, oh, hang on. Like he actually answered the phone. Since then, like I told him, like, this is a scam. Well, how do you know it's a scam? Like, dude, I do this all day, every day. This
is literally what
I have another complaint about the thing you're investing in. The guy's like, I can't get my money out. To me, that's proof. Well, that's not absolute proof. Like it's really hard.
Yeah.
And then I left him a bunch of messages, and one of the we have a kind of a handbook of dealing with victims.
Okay.
And one of it actually says, like, shake it up a bit, like yell at the person, swear at them, like it might snap them out of their stupor. And so I left him I didn't swear at him.
I was going to say, wait, as a government employee, you can call and yell and swear at people? This is amazing. And it's in the handbook?
I didn't swear and I didn't yell, but it was definitely like, hey man, like, I'm not going to call you again about this because I've spent my own time and money trying to actually get you the answer to the phone. I want you to think long and hard about what you're going to say when you realize this is a scam, and you have to admit to your family that they were right. And that how an RCMP officer came to your door and told you it was a scam, how the bank officials told you it was a scam, and how the BC Securities Commission employee spent a ton of time and his own money to spoof a caller ID of your scammer to get you to answer the phone, and you didn't.
Yeah.
And so, like, maybe that's going to switch something in his brain to, like, it's really hard.
I've seen this. I've had somebody who tried to convince me to invest in a crypto scam.
I know that case. That is one of my favorite cases for a number of reasons. But yeah,
right. And so we had talked about that one. But and he was absolutely convinced. And the numbers to me just didn't make sense. There's a return, and I think that's the
3% a week.
Yeah.
Like,
and I think that's the, like, as a look, I think we've done a bit of where compliance nerds and compliance officers and frontline staff can help. If we're going to have this episode out in the wild, I think we could probably do a bit of public service as well on it, which is, to me, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Yep.
And just because you see on a screen or on an email or a piece of paper that you're made so much money doesn't mean you actually have.
Yeah.
And I think, like, those two things alone are probably I don't know. Is there more to from a public service point of view? Would there be other things that we'd want to make sure we put
Yeah,
out there?
I just wanted to mention something about the screen because that was a point I wanted to bring up. That's what happens all the time. These websites, they're just hooked up to a database that the scammers can manipulate.
Right.
And they just make whatever returns they want. Also, for those of you that don't know really in detail how the excuse me, how the internet works, what happens when you go to your banking webpage, you send your credentials to the bank, and then the bank sends a bunch of data to your computer, and that data is stored sort of in RAM, and then that data gets displayed on your computer through a web browser.
Yeah.
You can edit that data. So what the scammers do when they go onto your computer, like AnyDesk or anything like that, they'll get you to log into online banking, and then they'll do a bit of like, hey, look at this other thing, while they monkey with the data, and they can edit what your online banking is showing or what your crypto account is showing.
Wow.
And so I had a case where a lady told me, she's like, yeah, I have $275,000 in my I don't know, I think it was crypto.com or something like that account. And what had happened was the scammers had actually edited the HTML data on her computer to show that balance.
Oh, wow.
And you had to, like, you would refresh it and it would still stay there. You had to hard refresh, like Control F5,
Yeah.
to actually get the balance to update to 0. And it was insane. Like the scammers are just so good at manipulating data here and there. So you can't even really trust stuff you see on your own screen sometimes.
Well, I mean, arguably the mistake was made earlier where somebody let them have access to the
True.
computer
Yeah.
in the first place, which from a security point of view, that would always remote desktop stuff is actually creates a pretty big security vulnerability.
Oh, sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that would be the other, potentially, that's an interesting other public point of protection, I suppose.
Sorry, I veered us off. Where did we want to get back to something?
Oh yeah, just kind of give it. Well, no, it's very topical. It's where, like, how are people? What can people do to protect themselves against pig butchering?
Yeah.
And then further to that, like, what are the indicators that we should kind of? So I think
as you said, if it's too good to be true, it probably is.
Yeah.
Right, and that's the key, really the key message. You can check if companies are registered. That's a really good indicator. Like if they're registered in Canada, it means they've sent us a bunch of documentation. We've reviewed all the documentation. There's people that'll answer our questions. They have certain capital levels. Like they're legit companies, right?
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes people spoof those companies, but you go to crypto.ca. Well, that's not crypto.com, right? And maybe they forgot to register crypto.net. I don't know. So
since we're doing the public service part of things, investing in private companies, you mentioned that's part of your business.
Yep.
Well, part of what BC Securities does. Sorry.
Yep.
If somebody's going to be thinking about doing a private investment into some sort of a private company, is there a way to check on the legitimacy of that with you guys, or what's that look like?
Sort of. I mean, private companies, they're not publicly reported companies. Anyone can start up a company. Anyone can be directors on a company, for better or for worse. The best thing I can recommend is check on our website to see, or in the internet really, to see if anyone in that company's ever been sanctioned.
Okay.
We've had a few cases where we have victims invest with people that, had you Googled them, you would have found out some very sketchy things about them.
Right. Okay.
Or done a Canley search. I mean, that's a little bit more in the weeds. But if you're investing $600,000 in something, like, you might want to get a lawyer involved to do a bit more in-depth research. And there was one Canley result where a judge said of this guy something like, "This man is extremely adept in the world of half-truths and of obscuring answers," or something like that.
Wow.
And so, I wouldn't have invested my $600,000 in that.
I don't know. There's a version of that can be said for much of the venture market. So.
It's usually not in a written court decision, though.
Well, that's fair. That's a good point. That's yeah.
One of the other things I wanted to mention too, I think in defense of pig butchering, I think a lot of the people who fall victim to these scams are going to be vulnerable for other reasons in their life. Like they're going through a divorce, they've lost their job, they're kind of in a bad place, and that seems to be common in a lot of the things we've seen. And I think a lot of the things that make people vulnerable to bad relationships probably make them vulnerable to pig butchering as well. So I think overall mental health, I try and never judge the victims because I'm not in their shoes,
Yeah.
right? Like if their parents just died, like I don't know, maybe I'd fall victim to, it's like if you think about it like this, a lot of these people have been chatting online with someone for months.
Yes.
And if you actually think like, okay, if I've been having this online relationship with someone for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and they're funny and they're smart and they're attractive and they actually care about me, I'd be hard pressed to say I wouldn't at least be confident in that person. I mean, I've got a good enough social circle. I've got friends. I've got, I'm healthy. I've got a decent job. Like, I wouldn't be more vulnerable to that type of thing, whereas other people would. So I think maintaining your friends and family's mental health and your own is probably a good defense against this type of thing.
That's super helpful, and something I just pulled out of that I think applies to anybody who's frontline. And this is realtors. This is actually where a realtor might see this. Is if you've got a client who approaches you who's going through all sorts of other things in their life,
Yeah.
and they're about to divest themselves of what might be their largest asset for what may not make sense,
Yeah.
that would be an interesting indicator.
That is a massive red flag.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
and it's not unusual for somebody who's going through a divorce to need to sell their home.
Yeah.
That part might make sense.
Yeah.
But if they're going through a divorce, selling their home, and they don't have a good answer as to where they're going to live with their kids, that should probably raise some red flags.
Yep.
And so I think there's that's a super insightful piece. I'm glad you mentioned it, because I think that's where frontline staff again might see some sort of an indicator in their day-to-day interactions with their clients.
Yeah, and if you know the person, it might make it a little bit easier to get a context. Like, I think investment advisors are the best frontline defense against a lot of this stuff because you know your client. I mean, in theory, but I liken it to, like, my mom's financial advisor knows a ton about her. She knows about me. I mean, full disclosure, I worked for her for a while, so the relationship's a bit different. But a lot of financial advisors should at least know, like, do you have a kid? Are you married? Like, how are things going? And if someone comes in and says, okay, I'm going to, my boyfriend needs help, a bit of help, so I need 10 grand. Oh, interesting. Okay, well, tell me about your boyfriend. What does he look like? Well, here's all the pictures of him. Oh, when did you meet him? Well, we haven't met yet. There we go. There's a huge, he's on tour in Afghanistan. Like, it's a bit of a dated example, but whatever. He works on the oil industry.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of scenarios that come up, and where these scammers can create these plausible sort of worlds where this person is overseas and they need money and that all those types of things. So that's where a frontline worker who knows a little bit about the person can say, like, well, this is out of character,
right,
for that person,
this doesn't match what else I know. This doesn't match what else I'm being told by this person, and or if I were in those shoes, that would cause me to be of concern. Interesting.
Or like, hey, we had one case. I think it was a 76-year-old guy that started talking about his girlfriend.
Oh yeah,
from Instagram, and the girlfriend from Instagram was like a Nike model.
Nice.
That someone had just repurposed the picture of. And you're like, yeah, it's
good for
that's
him.
not your girl. No, that's not your girlfriend, dude. That's someone who's getting money from you.
Yeah.
And sometimes they don't care. They're like, so what? I get a ton of fun out of it. She's only got 10 grand of my money. I got lots of money. I'm like, well,
you can spend your money how you want, I suppose.
You're funding North Korea. Like, I don't know what. Like, maybe. I don't know where the money goes.
Well, there's a scary thought, actually.
Yeah. I mean, some of it might go there, but most of it, like, that's the other part that I wanted to mention too, is what we're fighting here is not the hacker in someone's basement, or like the guy in rural Nigeria with a cell phone, that sort of the stereotype from a while ago. There are compounds, there are industries and organizations and corporate machines behind this. There's about 500,000 people in Southeast Asia in this industry.
Wow.
It is run like giant organizations. They've got HR departments, they've got IT, they've got manuals, they've got scripts, they've got ladders of escalation. Like, there's a group of people that have 50 Facebook accounts on their screen at one time that are chatting to a number of people. They'll take notes, and someone else will shift off and be able to talk to the victim as if they were the same person because they've got the notes from the previous person.
Wow.
And then when the hook comes in, then they get passed to a second set of people who are good at, they're the closers, right? They're the ones that get the money. There's dedicated groups of money launderers. Like, it's insane just how organized and effective this industry has become, and how much time and energy is spent protecting it and maintaining it. So, like, this is what people are up against. Like, this is a well-oiled machine.
This is a full-on company. Just
A gazillion of them, yeah.
That's crazy.
A lot of it is OC. Some of it's related to government corruption.
Okay.
Like in Myanmar, like what's anyone going to do to Myanmar?
Well, clearly.
I mean,
nothing.
China's tried. I think they sent the army into one or something. But yeah, like it's. I think investor education and defense is probably our most effective weapon, unless we're going to like send Jason Statham into a compound in Myanmar to do his thing. Like, but.
I think they've already made that movie at this point.
I watched it on an airplane.
Yeah,
It is awesome and terrible at the same time. Yeah, if you want to watch Jason Statham murder scammers for 92 minutes, watch The Beekeeper. It's great. If you like an intelligent, coherent plot, maybe not.
No.
Yeah.
No, this has been helpful. I really is there anything that we haven't touched on that you thought was important that our audience really needs to know before we kind of wrap things up here?
Yeah. I mean, we've gone through a lot of it. We've got the BCSC website, cryptoscams.ca. It's actually a pretty cool website they've done to sort of spot the signs of a crypto scam.
Okay.
Investright.org is our investor education site. You can go there. You can learn more about it. If you have doubts, like, call us, right?
Oh.
I or one of my coworkers can go through and say, like, look, this looks like a scam because of A, B, and C. And just remember, almost anything you can see on the internet is fake. We've had cases where scam crypto recovery companies, they also make those as a scam.
Yeah.
They'll just take your money and do nothing. But they have had 300 positive Trustpilot reviews.
Wow.
It's all they just generate fake positive reviews. So remember, it's so hard to separate the signal from the noise on a lot of these scams. But yeah, registration's a key one. Too good to be true is probably the best bet.
Right.
If it's too good to be true, it probably is.
And you can always call and get a professional opinion if you're having doubts. But if you're having doubts, you probably should reconsider before you get too far down this path.
That's probably the best piece of advice. Yep.
All right. Well, Chris, thank you again for so much, for sharing your knowledge, for taking the time, you always bring like really cool, interesting perspectives. And I have so much fun chatting with you. So thank you again for coming on the show, and really appreciate your input today.
No problem. More than welcome.
All right.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Know Your Compliance podcast. If you'd like more information about our guests, have a story idea, or want to be a guest, please reach out to hello@kycpodcast.com. If you want to discuss your anti-money laundering compliance needs with a member of the Really Trusted team, go to www.reallytrusted.com/consult.